can you please introduce yourself and tell us where you're tuning in from?
Okay, we're having good afternoons here. Good afternoon, Rolando, Jennifer, Christelle.
Ayan. Ayan, we have si Jana from Occidental Mindoro, si Ruth from Isabela. Ayan. We have Ainina from Cebu. Ayan, good afternoon to everyone. Thank you for the engagement. Ayan, si Rezi from Carmona, Cavite. Alam mo, Gabi, I just wanted to mention na, this month is March. So it's always in line with Women's Month. So with that, let's try to push this engagement further. And I want to ask this question in the crowd. Sino yung mga role model na women in your life? I want to see the answers there. Your mom, your sister, who are the role model women in your life? Yan, you have Josephine saying her mother.
Grabe, Alma, no? What I've noticed in our previous webinars this year, parang all over the Philippines, we have attendees.
Yes, and then again, I'm loving the engagement from everyone. Of course, we're getting mom, mauna talaga ang nanay natin. Pero I love how there's some variability. We have si Catriona Gray, who is a role model woman. We love that. Ayan. Teachers, yes, very integral to our crew. Once again, I just want to say good afternoon to everyone tuning in. Thank you for giving us your time this Wednesday. Ayan, okay, that's great. Maybe we can push forward, no, Gabby? Ayan. So, and we're just gonna cut the music out for a bit, and we want to introduce ourselves. So, hi, my name is Luis Almazar, and I'm the Wellbeing Services Associate of Positive Workplaces. And joining me is my very wonderful co-host.
Yes, I'm Gabby Liamson, and I'm the Learning and Development Associate of Positive Workplaces.
Ayan. So, as always, here in Positive Workplaces, we like to start with the mission of Positive Workplaces, which is to co-create cultures that enhance the well-being of the Filipino workforce. And you might ask, how do we do this, no? We do it through what is called the positivity ripples. It's actually a very intuitive framework. So we start, of course, with leading the self. So the thing about leading the self is we do that by teaching you guys or imparting you knowledge and skills that will better equip you to lead your own well-being. And with that, when you learn that, you can now start to lead others. I think yung favorite saying of our boss John is, kunwari sa plane, yung pag nagdo-drop yung oxygen masks, yung katabi mo, pwede mong tulungan, 'di ba? Pero kailangan mo muna ilagay yung mask sa sarili mo bago mo tulungan yung nasa kaliwa at kanan mo. That same way, you need to learn how to be a better leader of your own well-being before you start to help others. And it is only then when we help lead others that we are able to influence cultures, no? These cultures can range from compassion, team cohesion, all these great cultures that make great workplaces. And if these cultures are created within many companies, this is what leads to positive workplaces. Ito yung attack plan or strategy namin for how we fulfill our mission.
Yes, and for this month, since we're starting a new series, we are focusing on the theme, The Future is Female, Women and Well-Being in the Workplace, where we invited different powerful women who are excelling in their fields and who can share us practical tips on how to empower women in the workplace. So, Alma, syempre ayaw na natin silang i-keep. So, just a few reminders. We hope that you have another device or just keep another tab open to go to another link, because we will be having activities on Mentimeter. And then, of course, we would like for you to have your pen and paper for notes. And we highly encourage your engagement. But, of course, please be respectful in our chat box.
Yes, and of course we have an evaluation form at the end. So we put that so that you guys have an avenue to help us. Let us know what you think about our session, and it is also through this evaluation form that you will be receiving your e-certificate. And we wanted to note that it's only going to be open for 30 minutes. And I just wanted to give a couple of reminders when it comes to the e-certificate. Now, please make sure to write your full name and email address. Try not to put your nickname or a hidden username kasi that's what's going to be printed onto the certificate. And of course, when it comes to the certificates, we use a program for it. So don't be alarmed if you don't immediately get your certificate. Kindly wait at least 2 days before following up with our email if you still haven't received. And after the third day, we'll try our best to assess that problem. So ayan, that's it for the reminders, Gabby. Yeah, exciting.
Okay, Alma, I'm giving you the floor to introduce our speaker this afternoon.
Yeah. So again, joining us today is I have personally worked alongside Miss Elijah Corpus because we used to come from the same parent organization in college, Psychsoft. And so Elijah Corpus is the managing director and lead consultant of Elijah Corpus Consulting. She has designed and implemented learning, leadership, and team development programs for over 130 employees worldwide. That's her. She was based in the USA, working in one of the top tech companies in the world until 2018. But then Elijah decided to come back home to continuously refine her purpose here in the Philippines. So she's currently managing her own firm right now, Elijah Corpus Consulting, where they focus on partnering with organizations towards culture transformation, building capability of individuals, teams, and leaders, and of course, creating opportunities for empowerment towards making a positive impact on society. It is for this reason that we wanted Elijah to start off our Women's Month webinar for March. So without further ado, di ko pa patatagalin pa. Elijah, you may have the floor.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. And I'm really excited to spend the next hour with you learning a lot about this topic that sometimes can be a little bit controversial, but this is a safe space for us to really explore it. So matututo lang tayo together in the next few minutes. All right. And so, like what Alma and Gabby mentioned, you may call me Elisha. Let me introduce first my firm. We are very creatively called Elisha Corpus Consulting. And I love working with Alma and Gabby and Positive Workplaces on this webinar because we have actually very much aligned purposes or purpose statements when it comes to the work that we do. For us, we partner with different organizations to create cultures where people can make the impact that they want, where people can use the organization as a platform to come to life their purpose or to see the change and the difference that they want to see around them. Very much aligned with the kind of co-creation that Positive Workplaces is trying to inspire in different organizations. For me personally, I am very much passionate in diversity and inclusion, and that is why I'm so excited to do this topic with you today. Every October, for example, we do a free open to the public conference on diversity and inclusion, and it's just something that I think everyone should learn more about. Itong passion ko for this topic, this is something I solidified during my time at Microsoft. I was actually based there in the global headquarters working on global culture programs, and I saw just how important this topic was. Very lucky dahil kahit na it's a tech company where we know historically that it's mostly male, I got to see how that company started to transition from a hyper-competitive, infighting kind of culture to one that was more grounded on empathy, learning, and safety. A lot of the tips that I will be talking about today are things that I learned during my time in Microsoft and of course, during my time as a woman, because I am a woman and I have a lot of experiences that I hope we can also pull from for today. Simulan na natin. So to start it off, I'd love to learn more about all of you. And if you're comfortable, I invite you to rename yourself with your pronouns. For me, I'm Elisha Corpus, and my pronouns are she, her. She, her, because I identify as a woman. So yung sexual orientation, gender identity ko ay woman. I have a table here for you just in case you need some guidance on that. And if you want help renaming, you can simply put your mouse over your name, tapos go to more. And once you click more, rename, tapos you can type your pronouns there. I encourage you to do that because one easy way to reinforce inclusion is to ask people what pronouns they like to use. Of course, if you're not comfortable, not forcing you to do it, para lang dun sa mga comfortable, go ahead and change your pronouns. Let's see, great. I'm starting to see some people put their pronouns there. And go lang, keep on doing it as we go through our session for today. If you need help renaming, our wonderful moderators might be able to help you. All right, let's jump right into our first question. So, medyo role play muna tayo na imaginative lang. Imagine that we are all at work. So all 280-ish of us are working together. We are in the finance industry and our leaders are bankers. Okay, so mga boss natin, bankers, we're in finance. Someone in the office says, galit na naman si Boss Joey. Ayan, laging galit si Boss Joey. And so I invite all of us here, teammates, let's describe Boss Joey. Let's use Mentimeter for this. The link is right there in the chat posted by our tech support. But if you want to do it manually, go to www.menti.com and use the code 60242492. Let's jump into the Mentimeter and look at that. Hey, may napakalaking key. What else? What other words might we use to describe Boss Joey? Okay, gregarious, moody, temperamental, shouting. O nga, no, parang yan yung images na nakikita natin pag may galit na boss. Okay, let's see, what else? Easily irritated, aggressive, territorial. Okay, malaking moody at malaking bossy. Great, let's get a few more answers here and let's see. Hot-headed, pressure. Tama nga naman, di ba? Baka pagod na rin si Boss Joey. Mainitin ng ulo, masungit. Okay, so I think so far it looks like bossy, moody, mainitin ulo. These are words that are starting to pop for people. All right, let's go back into our slides. And now my question for you is, best guess, what pronouns would you associate with Boss Joey? So ngayon, type na lang natin sa chat. Very quickly, top of mind answer. Ano kaya yung pronouns ni Sir? Sir? He? He? Okay. Medyo trick question ba? Well, here's the thing. Joey can be a girl's name, right? I have a friend and her name is Joey and she's a wonderful leader. And so when I was thinking about this exercise, I actually had a girl in mind, which is a little bit different from what we're seeing, right? And so this activity is just a quick demonstration of how there are certain traits we associate with different people and different genders. There are characteristics we typically associate with masculinity, like being the boss or being the leader in the finance industry. Usually, ang mga bankers ay guys, diba? It's a very male-dominated industry. And so yun pa lang, we were already kind of prompting you to have a guy in mind. The thing is, some of these behaviors are stereotypes that are actually imposed by society. So hindi ibig sabihin na dahil si Boss Joey ay galit at mainitin ng ulo at pwedeng lalaki siya, hindi ibig sabihin na lahat ng lalaki mainitin ng ulo at laging galit, right? These are stereotypes that we are socialized to learn or to behave or to use as standards because of our upbringing. So for today, this is what we will do. First, let's talk about the stereotypes. Let's discuss toxic masculinity, what it is and what it is not. The more we understand these concepts, the more we can figure out what might we do so we can craft workplaces na hindi nag-adhere to these stereotypes. The next thing we want to do is to identify what toxic masculinity looks like in the workplace and how it negatively affects everyone in that organization. So of course, we will specify the context, meaning let's look at work. And our last thing that we will do today is to recognize steps that we can take to challenge these behaviors and create more inclusive work cultures. Of course, the goal here is for inclusion to be embedded, instilled in your culture. Kaya we will look at some tips and strategies that you can try. All right, keep the engagement going. I love the participation and we will need your answers throughout our session for today. Let's dig into our first part, which is really about discussing the terms and looking into some misconceptions. Toxic masculinity is an adherence to the limiting and potentially dangerous societal standards set for men and masculine identifying people. If we try to distill this into what toxic masculinity means, it could be a series of very narrow, most of the time unrealistic expectations of how men should behave. Stereotype siya. So ibig sabihin, ano bang stereotype? Stereotypes are widely held beliefs, and most of the time, these are very oversimplified ideas. So hindi niya nakakapture yung nuances in the kinds of characteristics or traits that people have. The thing about toxic masculinity is these are societal standards, meaning these are constructs we created for ourselves as a society. So hindi natin masasabi na ganun la talaga yung mga tao. Dahil these are things that we craft, we give meaning to. Now let me ask all of you, what are some of the stereotypes about men that you can think of? Baka pwede natin ilagay sa chat. Ano yung mga stereotypes natin tungkol sa mga lalaki na naririnig nyo? Okay, Lyra says breadwinner, Karen not emotional, that's right. Stricto, yeah, Arnold, totally agree that men don't cry. If we look at little boys, right? When little boys cry, ano yung usually sinasabi? Bawal umiyak, kalalaki mong tao, ba't ka umiiyak? So yeah, these are stereotypes. Shaina says, guys with long hair are perceived as gay. Oo, kasi we think that long flowy hair is for women only. Magaling sa math. O, kaya ako hindi talaga ako magaling sa math as a stereotype and as a fact. Okay, so diba, we have a lot of beliefs that have been passed on generation to generation. Some of these may be true for some men, but in general, hindi naman lahat ng lalaki ganito. When it comes to toxic masculinity, what we're saying here is there are sets of kind of dangerous behaviors that we raise men to do and to demonstrate. And so we want to see how might we start shifting from toxic masculinity to healthier masculine behaviors. When it comes to toxic masculinity behaviors, just to summarize, these are some of those behaviors that we know of. First, there's the suppressing of emotions or masking of distress. Diba? Yung katulad ng sabi niyo, hindi pwede umiyak, hindi pwedeng magpakita na weak ka or na hindi mo alam kung anong gagawin. Next is there's maintenance or an appearance of hardness. Kanina meron ako nakita sa chat na stoic dapat, yung hindi dapat masyadong emotional yung muka. These are stereotypes we have for men. And then, of course, another one is that men need to have this utmost importance that they assign to power. Usually, because they have to get that power at any means, then violence becomes an indicator. What I want to point out here is these are actually taken from American Psychological Association's guidelines for psychological practice with boys and men. So bakit to important to note? The APA, they usually have guidelines for minority groups, ethnic and linguistic groups, and historically marginalized groups. And so in the beginning, they thought men don't need a special guideline kasi nga hindi naman sila historically marginalized. But over the past years, what we realize is that men are being raised in a certain way and not all of these behaviors are healthy. And so this guideline, set of guidelines from the APA is a recognition that toxic masculinity exists. Hindi lang siya gawa-gawa ng mga feminists or ng mga babae. This is something that we really have to address as a society. The thing about toxic masculinity is marami siyang misconceptions. What we have to understand here is toxic masculinity does not imply that all men are bad. From now until the end of our workshop, I hope you understand that we are not coming from a place where we say, pag lalaki lahat yan, wala, di pagkakatiwalaan, lahat yan masama. So it's not what we're implying at all. We are not saying that all masculine traits must be changed. There are masculine traits like confidence and strength and competitiveness na kailangan natin lahat. Kahit na babae ka man or whatever gender you identify with, there are traits that we do need to practice. And so we're not saying that by challenging toxic masculinity, we must get rid of all masculine traits. That's not at all what we're going after. Another misconception here is that we are going against all men as a group. So hindi yan totoo when it comes to challenging toxic masculinity. We recognize individuality. Kasi, yes, it's not all men, right? Not all men are abusers. Not all men are liars. Not all men will shout at you. And so we just have to recognize that it's not about attacking the whole group, but it's about acknowledging that this is a systemic problem. We have been socialized to believe these things or to use these traits as standards. And so because it's a systemic problem, we also have to address it from a systems perspective. Another misconception here is that challenging toxic masculinity is about making women the better group. That's not what we're saying here. It's not about glorifying women or saying na dapat babae na lang lahat or babae na lang maging leader ng lahat ng kumpanya and lahat ng bansa sa buong mundo. That's not what we're saying here. What we're saying here is that historically, women have been discriminated and marginalized. And so we have to figure out bakit yun nangyayari. We have to get at the root causes, and one of those root causes would be toxic masculinity. The great thing that's happening recently is that this movement is starting to gain a lot of traction. In 2017, for example, lalo na sa Amerika, and I'm sure you've heard about it here also, there was the Me Too movement that became very popular. A lot of high-powered women, actresses, even celebrities, they came out with their own stories of abuse by powerful men. So dahil dun sa Me Too movement, napapag-usapan natin yung mga ganitong bagay more openly these days. In 2019, there's a razor company, Gillette, that came out with an ad targeting toxic masculinity. I think it's a great ad, and I actually invite everyone to watch it all together right now. So here's what we will do. I'm going to play a video, and while it's playing, just ask yourself, what are your first impressions that you're getting? What is it making you feel or think? Okay, so let me start the video right now.
Bullying.
The Me Too movement against sexual
Toxic
harassment.
masculinity.
Is this the best a man can get? Is it? We can't hide from it.
Sexual harassment is taking over.
It's been going on far too long. We can't laugh it off.
what I actually think she's trying to say.
making the same old excuses.
Boys will be boys. Boys will be boys. Boys will be boys.
But something finally changed.
Allegations regarding sexual assault and sexual harassment.
But she says it's
And there will be no going back. Because we believe in the best in men.
Come on.
To say the right thing. To act the right way.
Bro, not cool. Not cool.
Some already are. In ways big
Yo, men.
and small.
I am strong.
But some is not enough.
It's not how we treat each other, okay? Okay.
Because the boys watching today will be the men of tomorrow.
All right, so maybe very quickly, show me some reactions. Like, what did you think of the video? You can use your clap, your thumbs, or your hearts. What are some reactions we're getting here? I see some hearts. Oh, wow. Okay, that's great. And then maybe in the chat, let me know, what are some of your first impressions? What are your thoughts, your feelings when it comes to watching that ad? Okay, Mary J here says, gender doesn't define who a person is. There are bigger things behind one's gender aside from what society dictates. Yes, very good insight there, Mary or Marie. Okay, Renil says it was powerful. I thought so too. I love that commercial. And Ramilin says, bullying, gender-based violence, we should promote gender equality. And Ruth Ann says, finally, an ad worth watching. That's great. And I love all of these reactions. If you want to spread that ad around, that's all on YouTube. So it's easy to find it. The thing is, a lot of you have very positive reactions, but that was not what happened when this ad came out in 2019. So in 2019, within 48 hours, they had more than 2 million views on YouTube, 23,000 likes, but 214,000 dislikes. Think about that, right? What does that say about how society views toxic masculinity? Ang daming galit nung nilabas yung ganong video. And so there's still so much that need to be done. When it comes to toxic masculinity, it's a controversial topic. It hits on a lot of vulnerabilities. It hits on a lot of feelings that men have, but they can't express. Now that we've gone through some of the definitions and misconceptions, we must ask ourselves, so why does this matter? Why does this matter in our daily lives as employees or leaders in our organization? Let's dig right into that by going into our next part, which is now going specifically into the workplace and how toxic masculinity applies there. In 2001, there was this company that filed for bankruptcy, and they really caused a lot of noise. That company is called Enron. Noong 2001, nung nag-file sila ng bankruptcy, na-reveal lahat ng corruption and greed that went on in that company. What they found out was they were cheating on so many of their financial statements. They just had a lot of very questionable ethical decisions. If we try to look into the culture Enron had leading up to 2001, a lot of people said it was a very boys club kind of culture. Boys club meaning, yes, madami talagang mas male identifying in their workplace, but also it was the kind of culture where people had to win at all costs. Hindi ka pwedeng magkamali. You can never talk about your mistakes, or else your other people in the organization will ridicule you. Because of all of that, Enron collapsed, and they made everyone aware of just how greedy, how corrupt corporations can be. A lot of people will remember Enron because really prior to Enron, there wasn't anything that big of a scandal that happened in terms of companies cheating and being greedy. I have another example that's a little bit closer to home. What you're seeing here is a visual that came out pre-2010s before the Microsoft that you see today. Yung visual na to, yung gumawa niyan, tinatry niya i-describe yung org charts ng iba't ibang tech companies. So as we can see, Google, they're very famous for having like a very matrix kind of workforce, kaya ang daming lines. Amazon is still quite hierarchical, and then Facebook is like, anything goes. Tapos yung pag-describe niya ng Microsoft is, I don't know if you can see, but there are different siloed departments holding guns. So before, during like the pre-2010s time, a lot of infighting happened in Microsoft. Historically, a lot of people post about this and talk about it, so this is not a secret. But what would usually happen is that teams within the company would compete for the same clients. They would try to get bigger contracts from each other, even if it means sabotaging the other groups. What ended up happening, and what I was so lucky to witness, is that in 2014, a new CEO came along. His name is Satya Nadella, and with Satya's CEO leadership, what he focused on was culture. He said that this kind of culture of infighting, where we just try to be competitive and one-up each other, that will not do. Now we have to lead with empathy. Now we have to work with each other because we are one company after all. And so he tried to transition the company from a very competitive, aggressive, yung kailangan naninigaw ka para pakinggan kind of environment, to an environment where we can listen, where we will have empathy for people around us, and we will lift up people, especially those who are marginalized or historically discriminated. Kita naman natin that worked beautifully for the company. I was very lucky to be part of those efforts, and even until now, the company is reaping those benefits. Stock price is at an all-time high, and people think the company is cool again. And so what are we saying here? I hope that with that story, you can see how in one company, night and day yung pagkakaiba. If we go with more traditionally masculine, bordering on toxic kind of behaviors, versus being more empathetic and having a more listening route. So yung isang company na yan, yun yung experience niya when it comes to challenging those toxic masculinity behaviors. Let's look into what might toxic masculinity look like at work. First, there's this behavior that people cannot show weakness. It's important to note here that this does not just apply to men. In a place that has dominantly male or male identifying employees, and in a place where toxic masculinity is not addressed, lahat ng tao nagsasuffer. And so, sa mga ganitong organizations, hindi pwedeng mag-show ng weakness. You always need to have confidence. You always need to be that person with swag and commanding the room, or else you fail. You can never be the person who will show mistakes or any kind of tender and vulnerable emotions. Another characteristic is that strength and stamina are more important than anything else. In workplaces where toxic masculinity is at play, kailangan may endurance yung mga tao. Sa ganitong places, working long hours is expected and even praised. Bawal mag-break, laging overtime, dapat laging hustle culture. Ganun yung kind of environment that we see in these places. Next is, in these kinds of organizations, people have to put work first. Meaning, hindi pwedeng mag-absent because your kid has to go somewhere. Di pwedeng mag-absent because you have to watch your elderly parents. No, work has to be before everything else because that's the only way you can achieve and get higher up in society. And then the last characteristic here is there's a dog eat dog kind of mentality. In this kind of scenario, there are winners and the losers. This kind of scenario emphasizes that it's a zero-sum game. Yung hindi ako pwedeng manalo, na yung teammate ko manalo rin. Ang mentality natin dito is, isa lang sa atin yung matitira. Matira matibay. Yes, and like what is said in the chat, it's being the alpha that becomes what's important. A lot of these examples could already give us an idea of what working in a toxic masculinity workplace might be like. And so I want to ask all of you, given these characteristics we talked about, how would you feel working in a place with these traits? Let's go back to Mentimeter and I'd love to get your thoughts on this. So kung ganun ang workplace mo, anong mararamdaman mo? Paano ka magbe-behave on a daily basis? Let's see. The Mentimeter link is right there in the chat in case you closed the link earlier. Or again, you could use the code 60242492. Yeah, it's a very pressuring kind of workplace. Yung hindi ka pwedeng mag-relax and huminga kahit konti kasi alam mong you always have to be on 100%. I see in the chat someone said, resign. Yes, it's the kind of workplace where siguro pagising mo pa lang, iniisip mo na, ayoko na, mag-resign ako today. Yes, it's depriving. People might get burnt out. Yes, it's draining. Yeah, Josephine says it's also challenging. So these kinds of workplaces, a good thing about them, if ever, is that it pushes people to do their best work. But something to ask ourselves, right, is at what cost? People may be doing their best work, but if you look at how they are doing mentally, physically, emotionally, worth it ba? Na ganun ka-challenging ang isang workplace. So yeah, increased anxiety, you're just waiting for 5 p.m. out. So wala kang commitment dun sa organization because you don't feel that connection. Think about that, right? Kahit iniisip ko palang napapagod na ako. But the thing is, there are organizations nowadays that promote these kinds of behaviors. When organizations promote these behaviors, they negatively impact women. What do we mean by that? If we look at some of the data, at least 2 billion women around the world have experienced sexual harassment. That's a lot of people experiencing something that we think only happens to select people. Women also do twice the domestic labor and unpaid care work. Kaya pagod na yung mga women, lalo na pag parents, for example, kasi gagawin nila yung trabaho nila, pero sila rin yung gumagawa sa bahay. Yes, of course, some men do contribute in that household work, but for the most part, it's still on women to get their work and their personal lives in order. Women leaders are 60% more likely to give emotional support, but they are also more likely to report being burnt out. Lalo na with the latest data from the pandemic, we know that people who worked for women leaders felt more emotionally and mentally secure. We know that there are better outcomes because they know they have leaders they can talk to and leaders who care for them. We see that in the data. But something we also see is that these women leaders are tired. Maybe it's because no one is supporting them, or it's harder for them to find their higher up leaders who will understand where they're coming from. And of course, hindi na bago tong data na to, but in 2021, women are still promoted to manager levels at lower rates. It's something that's been happening for a long time, and at 2021, it's still the case. If we think about what we are going through, hindi lang yan lahat, di ba? Women every day get told, bawal masyadong mataas yung boses kasi hindi ka tunog professional pag masyadong matining yung boses mo. And so we're forced to lower our pitch when women naturally have higher pitches. We're told to be more confident, to lean in, be more assertive. So these are things that I'm sure every woman in your life or you yourself have heard. Locally, if we look at our media and representations of leaders in movies, lalaki pa rin. And yung mga lalaki na nakikita natin sa movie, they may be strict, they may be moody, they may shout at you, but there's an aspirational element to it. Take, for example, the movie On Top There. That's John Lloyd Cruz as Sir Miggy Montenegro, right? In the very classic trilogy of movies with Sarah G. And so if we think about Miggy Montenegro, people hate him, but they still love him because he's guapo, he's rich. He has all of these qualities we aspire towards. But if you look at the poster below that, in 2013, there's a movie that came out with Marian Rivera and Ding Dong Dantes, and it's called My Lady Boss. Title pa lang, di ba? It's already implying that a girl cannot be a boss. They really had to put lady in the title. In this movie, Marian Rivera's character is the leader. And same as Sir Miggy, she was hated by the people in their office. But the kind of hate they have towards her was very isolating. They don't want to be her. They don't want to be like her. They don't see in her characteristics they want to aspire towards. Until towards the end of the movie, she became more feminine. Her hair, instead of being in a bun, she had it in curls. It's flowy, it sways with the wind. And it was only then when people in the office opened up to her. There are so many of these representations, and even our media is telling us that this is what leaders look like. The thing here is, it's not just women who get hurt by toxic masculinity. Men are also affected. There are studies that show that male leaders who ask for help are viewed as less competent. When it comes to disclosing weaknesses, men are perceived to have lower status when they do so. In this experiment, what's interesting is they put people into groups where they had a task that they needed to do. Whenever a man would share with the group that they have a weakness related to the task, they lost influence and it predicted more conflict within the group. Another very interesting, in my opinion, data is that men who are rated as agreeable, they make 18% less income than people or men who are lower in agreeableness. Makikita natin dito na nire-reinforce natin yung narrative na dapat aggressive, competitive, and overconfident ka kung lalaki ka. Kasi kahit yung mga lalaki who are more communal, more caring, we pay them less and give them lesser conditions for success. And of course, like what everyone already mentioned in the chat, men are not given space to cry. In this study, so actually in the article that I have cited here, it compiles different studies. And one of the research articles that they studied was that in a workplace, when men cry, parang iniisip ng mga tao na, bakit siya umiiyak? Hindi siya dapat umiiyak. Parang may disconnect. So fundamentally, we don't see that men can cry. The thing about toxic masculinity is it doesn't just hurt men or women. It hurts your whole organization. These days, the term psychological safety is a very popular hot topic. Psych safety is the belief that the team is safe for interpersonal risk-taking. This means that in a team, I can make mistakes because we will learn from it. I can talk about my mistakes. I know that people will not call me stupid because of the mistake. I can give new and unique ideas because I will not be ridiculed by my teammates. So yun ang isang psychologically safe environment. What we know from studies is that psych safety is fundamental to high performance. In Google, for example, in 2015, one of their studies showed that their highest performing teams are the ones who operate with psychological safety. Think about that. When we promote behaviors that make people fight each other, laugh at each other, then we are not creating a psychologically safe space. So paano pa tayo magiging high performer if we cannot do that? At this point, I think it's time for us to try to see what are the practices that we can do. And so let's move into our third part, which is about recognizing some steps that we can take so we can intentionally build more inclusive work cultures. First is Sana All My Voice. Like what the title of our webinar today states, Sana All. So pagdating sa mga tips na to, it's for every single one of us, men, women, whatever gender you identify with, it's up to all of us to work together so that we can create the kind of culture we want for our future workplaces. Sana All My Voice. This is about challenging the interruptions that usually happen in meetings. Lalo na pag virtual, di ba? Ang daling ma-mute or ang daling ma-overshadow, lalo na kapag ka merong super vocal, super aggressive and assertive people. Something we can do is to be observant. Make sure that we are seeing sino yung mga na-interrupt or maybe sino yung parang may sasabihin but they did not get a chance to say their piece. We can easily say something like, oh, excuse me, I think blank has something to say. Maybe let's get back to them. It's a way for us to be allies for each other, just observing who might need your support and who might need to have the attention drawn towards them. Another thing we can do is to notice those who are not speaking. If we are virtual, like on Zoom, for example, we can send them a private message and say, hey, oh, Alma, parang tahimik ka today. Anong meron? Okay ka lang ba? Diba? It's easily checking on them. Or if you are in an in-person face-to-face meeting and you see that someone's, very quiet, very sad, catch up with them after. Do a quick debrief and say, hey, how'd that meeting go for you? I noticed you were a little bit quiet and reserved today. Is there anything we can do to change that for the next meeting? Again, this is important not just for women, but for everyone. Kasi nga, sinabi natin na kahit yung mga men, if they are not aggressive, they are punished for it. And so we also have to help them to speak up and say their piece. Another thing we can do is ask your colleagues about their communication style. There are many different kinds of preferences when it comes to how we talk to each other. To be more proactive, a best practice here is sa simula pa lang ng project or ng team development nyo, kung bago kayong team, already ask people, how do you like to be messaged? Okay lang ba sa'yo na tawag agad or text muna? Do you prefer email or Viber? These are things that it sounds so common sense, but you can tell that if we try to individualize our approach, it helps people feel like they are being valued for who they are and their preference. Next up, Sana All My Safe Space to Share. This is about challenging the notion that we need to fight to have space in our organizations. If you're there, then you deserve to be there and you have something you can contribute. One of the things we can do is to start asking our colleagues, lalo na our male colleagues, how do you feel about that? Usually when we talk to our male colleagues, it's about, what do you think? What are your thoughts on XYZ? We have to be intentional about bringing it to the feelings level. Hindi unprofessional to check in with people about their emotions. And so I encourage you, maybe the next time you have a teammate or a group mate, lalo na if guy, after the meeting, try to ask them, how do you feel about that? and then get them to talk about emotions. Another thing we can do is to invite men to share about their personal stories. Lalo na yung mga men who you know have experiences with childcare and housework. In organizations, usually it's women who talk about their kids, nagluluto pa sila ng lunch, magluluto pa ng dinner, magsusundo pa ng anak. It's usually women who bring up these topics. But there are studies that show that nowadays, compared to the 1970s, there are actually more men who are involved in caring for their kids and in doing housework. So invite them to have those conversations. Ask them, kamusta yung anak mo? Ano nang ginagawa niya sa school? Paano kayo nag-aaral? It's said that if we ask men for tips also, they feel that they have more responsibility as a parent and they can bring in that part of them into the workplace. And then the third thing we can do is to be explicit, not just about inclusion, but also about behaviors you do not want to see. Lalo na kapag ka nasa gatherings or meetings. The thing about organizations is we usually like to focus on the positive, right? We would usually say, we want to create a future where inclusion happens. But it's awkward to say, that means bawal mag-joke ng offensive. Or that means bawal mag-make ng assumptions na kung medyo quote-unquote malambot yung isang lalaki, bakla yan. So these are assumptions that we have to explicitly say we do not allow in our organizations. The thing about the explicitness of our statements is sometimes we assume that people already know these things, but the more we verbalize it, the more we find other people who are also like-minded. Number 3, sana all may opportunities. If we are in a decision-making situation or we are in a meeting where big changes have to happen, it's important to take a step back and assess whose voices are not in the room. There are so many stories of how decisions are made by just men, and it turns out women cannot relate with those decisions. For example, in the beginning stages of AI, lalo na yung mga voice automated accounts, they started getting complaints from women customers that, hey, my Siri doesn't respond. My Siri doesn't hear me. And what they found out was it's because a lot of the testing happened with men. Most engineers are men. Most people in the tech industry are men. And so the pitch that the voice automation app or whatever assistant was picking up, it wasn't taking into account the pitch of women. Very important that we have an inclusive room where we have different voices with different perspectives. Another thing we can do to provide opportunities for everyone is to mentor diverse sets of people. For the leaders here in the room especially, if you have a chance to be a mentor or a sponsor to people, try to branch out. Don't just take in people who are like you, with the same personalities, the same styles, the same gender. And of course, even if we are not yet leaders, we have something we can do. When you select teammates, especially if projects are more open to different people coming together, choose diversity. The easy thing to do is to choose your friends, right? Yung ganyan tayo, lalo na pag school, di ba? Yung when the teacher says grouping is whatever you want, you already start tapping your friends. The thing is, our friends are most of the time very much like us. And so I challenge you that maybe next time, try to get people who are not like you. You never know the richness in perspective that they may bring. Number 4, there are only 5 tips. So number 4 is, sana all are leaders who espouse inclusion. Get your chat ready because I have a question for you. There's this statement that if you search online, it's very popular. So I just start kissing them. I don't even wait. And when you're a star, they let you do it. You can do anything. Grab them by the pussy. You can do anything. Would you work for someone who says something like this? Let me know in the chat. Kahit yes or no lang. Hell no. Okay. Lots of no's and the thumbs down. But the thing is, who said this? Donald Trump. It's easy for us to say we're not going to work for someone like this, but literally a nation voted him to be the highest leader in their land. It's interesting, right? And you might think, malayo yung Amerika sa atin. But there are videos of our own president behaving in this way, stealing kisses, trying to grab women's private parts. And so think about that, right? We have to be able to hold our leaders to higher standards of behavior. Disrespecting women is not a joke. It's not something to be taken lightly. And the more we stand up to that, the more we can start signaling to these leaders that they have to stop behaving that way. Hindi na yan tama at never siya naging tama. So now question, what if now you have a man who says vulnerability is not a weakness? Would you work for this guy? Yes or no? Would you work for this guy? All right, lots of yeses. This is actually Terry Crews, and he's one of the most vocal advocates against toxic masculinity. So now, it's important that we share stories of men who espouse inclusion. Nakakagalit pag nakikita natin yung mga katulad ni Donald Trump, right? Yung mga ganong kinds of leaders. But it's also important to show that there are good things happening. There are people out there who are campaigning and trying their best to do better. Stories are important because they give us examples of how to behave in the kind of way that we want to reinforce. In your organizations, look for stories of men who are very open about childcare. Look for stories of men who are caring leaders, of male colleagues, for example, who really take the time to approach with empathy and listen to problems. The more we spread stories about that, the more we can normalize these kinds of behaviors. And then, of course, something else we can do is to create a strong focus on your organization's mission and make the connections to inclusive behaviors. Lahat ng ginagawa natin about inclusion, of course, we do it because it's the right thing. As humans, we have to help each other and support each other and not intentionally discriminate each other. Tama naman yun. But in the business setting, we also want to show that these create ripples and profits and return on investments like no other we can see. And so dapat nako-connect natin yung inclusive behaviors ultimately to what the company is trying to do. For example, there are researchers who worked with an oil company. In the oil company, they have these oil rigs, right? So imagine niyo, mga construction workers, very muscly, macho men. Ang hirap nila turuan siguro about empathy and listening and emotions, right? What the company did was, instead of approaching it from an emotional perspective, they approached it from a safety perspective. They started to say, okay, our ultimate goal is to have the safest oil and energy company. How do we ensure safety? Kapag safe ang isang organization, people talk about mistakes. In a safe organization, people are able to care for each other and trust that they are not sabotaging each other. They know that they have a community of people they can rely on. So dahil na-connect nila yung safety with these kinds of inclusive behaviors, they were able to transform the culture of the people in that oil rig. So again, it's not just about emotions, it's really about creating the kind of environment that will also help push your organization's mission further. And last is, sana all are learners. Something we can do is to train broadly on diversity and inclusion. Most of the time, in the kind of work that I do, for example, The entry point is gender sensitivity. Most companies would usually just have gender training, talk about LGBTQIA, etc. The challenge here is to go further. Train broadly, talk about diversity and inclusion as a concept, talk about unconscious bias, and how we need to create safety. When we introduce these topics, we give people the words that they can use to describe their experiences. And the last tip for today is you will make mistakes, but you need to keep trying. When it comes to diversity and inclusion, lalo na with challenging toxic masculinity, we're not perfect. These are concepts that people are still studying up to today. And so kahit na yung experts on D&I, kahit na yung mga feminists or advocates for women, I'm sure they make mistakes all the time. Even men who do not like toxic masculinity behaviors, I'm sure they also have slip-ups here and there. I want to end by talking a little bit about my own personal experience. When I came back home here in 2018, I went to this conference, and there was a talk there by this man, a high-powered lawyer, quite old actually, very popular in his field. And so one of his slides had this. In his slide, he says that women are actually not disadvantaged and men are the ones who are denied benefits. In his whole talk, he gave rape jokes. He talked about nuns and sexuality or sexual behaviors, just the most inappropriate topics ever. And me being an advocate for diversity and inclusion, I always tell my clients, I always advise people to speak up. When you see or hear men or anyone talking in that way, you have to do something. And the thing is, I didn't do anything. I just sat there, and there were women around me who were chuckling as this person gave one rape joke after another. Like, that to me was one of the most disgusting days of my life. Like, I was not proud of who I am and what I did and how I stayed silent. But the more I think about it, the more I can understand that that was a sobering reality lesson for me. During my time in Microsoft, during my time abroad, I was exposed to so many concepts on diversity and inclusion, so many researchers with the groundbreaking ideas. But this specific talk with this man was a reality check for me that it's not all rainbows and butterflies when it comes to diversity and inclusion. Marami pa tayong kailangan gawin. There are times when you don't live up to your standard for yourself when it comes to being an advocate. But we try again, and we keep on figuring out our own voice and our own story as we advocate for more inclusive workplaces. All right, now is a good time to start wrapping up and to distill our insights from today. Question for all of you. What is the one thing you will try to practice from today's session? So let's go back to the Mentimeter, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. If there's just one thing you will make sure to remember or one thing you'll even try, what would that be? So go ahead and type it in the Mentimeter. And let's see, maybe while waiting, I'd love to get your thoughts, Alma, being our designated male representative.
Sorry, I hope naman na di nyo marinig yung ulan. Medyo lumakas yung ulan bigla dito sa Cainta. So ayun, for everyone living in Cainta area, hope you guys are all okay. For me naman, yung key practice ko, by the way, Elijah, great learnings. What I love the most is, Women's Month to eh. So a lot of our target market, iniisip nila, baka this webinar is not for me. And I love how you made this session very inclusive for men, teaching us what it is, the toxic cultures and what we can do to help it. Ako, I will say, when you talked about how being over excellent, looking at the numbers, putting so much importance in that can be perceived as toxic masculinity. Uh, it hit home because I find myself to be someone na feel ko in order to get promoted, to reach far in life, I need to be the best of the best. And minsan nawawalan ako ng balance sa buhay ko nun. So uh, you affirmed me, or like rather you taught me na sometimes it's not all about that. Maybe if I try to focus on different things, I can help create a culture that is more inclusive for my coworkers and also for myself. So that's what I'll try to do more.
Yeah, thank you so much, Alma. I love that reflection. Because the thing about this is, diba, we're not saying you shouldn't be competitive or you shouldn't aim for the best. Kailangan naman talaga yon na motivated tayo to be our best. But what we want is balance. Yung hindi lang puro results. You have to also consider the emotional, mental needs of the people around you. And that's what we're trying to challenge here when it comes to toxic masculinity. Let's look at some of your answers here. Okay, calling out enablers. Yes, so very important that we call out these behaviors. Sometimes I like to use the term calling in because call out can sound very threatening. So if we can invite these people into a safe space for conversation, try to do that. All right. Be observant and check when someone wants to talk. Very good. Being more empathetic. Diversity po, wag laging makipag-grupo sa friends. Charot. It's one of the hardest tips, I promise, because I love working with my friends too. So yeah, I love that. That's something you'll take away. Calling out unethical ideas. Yes. I saw an answer earlier that said, stop calling my brother bakla when he cries. That's a great way to start because like what we said, it's socialization. And so it starts at home when people are young. All right, exploring and respecting the differences in genders, speaking up, being more empathetic. Great. And thank you so much, everyone, for sharing your lessons there. Keep on putting them in the Mentimeter and we'll read them later. Just to wrap up, here are some of the key messages to remember. Number one, it's not toxic to talk about toxic masculinity. It's awkward, yes. It's controversial, yes. Pero is it wrong? No, it's not. It's not wrong to talk about these things because it's only in talking about them that we can start making changes. Number two, dismantling systems that perpetuate toxic masculinity uplifts everyone. Para sa lahat ito, hindi natin sinasabi na men lang yung magbabago. Lahat tayo as a society will have to contribute and make a stand when it comes to addressing these systemic issues. And number three, our goal is to create work cultures where we can celebrate differences and where we have freedom to express vulnerabilities and uniqueness. At the end of the day, we have to always remind ourselves of the outcome. Bakit ba natin to ginagawa? We are doing it because we know that when people are able to be themselves, they thrive better and we have better work organizations. We work so much in a day, right? So many hours, sometimes more than half of our day is spent at work. If we can't enjoy our work, that means half of your day is spent miserable. And so this is one of the most impactful things we can do to be supportive of the people around us, to create better communities and societies where people feel like they can enjoy what they do and find meaning in it. Thank you so much again, everyone. And just very quickly, connect with us on social media if you'd love to get more learnings. I'd love to hear more from all of you. I'll try to post the links to resources for today's webinar tonight. I have a lot of websites that you can easily access. And in case you're interested to learn more, I'll post them there. Also, join us in our next workshop with Elisha Corpus Consulting. We are doing creative problem solving on March 26th. And with that, thank you all so much. And I hope that this is a start for us to collectively start to challenge those toxic masculinity behaviors in our workplaces. I'll turn it back over to you, Gabby and Alma.
And thanks so much, Elijah. Again, because we are gonna open to a very short Q&A. I just wanted to point out that very small note that you had in the end na totoo na nga naman na we are at work for 8 hours, some people even 10, 12 hours in their day. And why not improve that? Because that takes up a big part of your day. So people would think, okay, ano ba yung mga main problems? Stress, too much work. Yes, those are main problems. But then looking at stuff like this, yung culture ng kumpanya, yung toxic masculinity, you might not see it as as clearly as the other things, but this is an important thing that we should all take note of. And little by little, it can help improve how we feel about work, and it can encourage us to get up on Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays. And that was such a great insight you put out, Elisha. Ikaw naman, Gabby, did you have anything you wanted to share before we move forward with our Q&A portion?
Yes, thank you, Elijah. I think hindi lang yung learners natin yung may nabaon. Kami rin ni Alma, we were talking kanina na we were really learning so much. And I just want to stress yung sinabi mo na we are giving people the language to talk about this. Kasi parang they know, head knowledge, they know, but they don't know how to express it or they don't know what it's called. So I think this is one great way to jumpstart that process. Okay, so now we're opening the floor for questions. We're gonna use Pigeonhole, or for those who can't access Pigeonhole, you can actually just type your questions in the chat box. So you can just go to pigeonhole.at.
Ayan, and we'll also see our tech support, Sam, who's helping us out in the chat. Nilagay niya yung link for the Pigeonhole. And don't worry, this can be anonymous, or you can choose to put in your name if you want to be seen as the person asking the question. So, ayan. So, again, we can resend the chat para hindi lang siya mawala. Ayan.
I think wait. It's supposed to be sana all.
Ay.
Wait a minute.
Ayan. Sorry.
Alma.
Ayan.
Yeah. Thank
you
so much.
Sorry. Okay, that is the link. All right. Okay. So ayan, we already have one question very quickly. So the solution to toxic masculinity is to balance traditional masculine traits like competitiveness with feminine traits like collaboration. What would toxic femininity look like?
All right, good question. So actually, if you look at the popular literature, hindi masyadong common na gamitin toxic femininity as a term, but I think I know where you're getting at. So for example, the usual traits that we associate with women are very communal, very collaborative, right? Like we really value relationships. When you go overdrive with that, there are times when it can become too yung parang conforming, yung people don't really challenge each other, right? It can become like just a group where people say yes to everything. They don't take the time to challenge ideas and question each other's ideas. And so that might be one result of quote unquote toxic femininity. It could also be places where people are, diba? One of the things about femininity that we usually associate is emotions is something we talk about. And so there are times when if you push too much towards that, it could be an overly emotional workplace where you don't look at the hard numbers or the results. So now what do we do, right? How do we balance that? One of the great concepts you can look into is psychological safety. When we talk about psychological safety, it's not about like feminine traits or masculine traits. It's really about creating a culture where everyone can drive towards high performance, but that drive towards high performance is about being open to mistakes, innovation, creativity, and learning from each other. And so maybe instead of looking at the feminine or masculine traits, we can push more into that kind of psychological safety area. And it's a way to start describing the kind of culture that we want to see where both of these traits are balanced. Right? Hopefully that helps. Yeah, very interesting question, no? Because it's interesting, right? There's toxic masculinity, but toxic femininity is not a term that you would usually see.
Yeah, thank you for that, Elijah. Ayan, Gabby, do you want to pick out the next question?
Okay, let's try this one. If Ma'am Elijah, if you were to bring back the time during your experience in that mind-turning webinar you shared, what will you do or say?
Oh, wow. I've never been asked this before. Okay. Well, first, what I would do is I don't think I would like just stand up and call out that person right there and then. Why I won't do that is because, well, number one, at that point, I'm very new in the industry. Like I did not have the credibility that they would know me for to be able to have weight in that kind of forum. And so magiging useless lang if tumayo ako doon. They might just think, bang batang yan, complain, di ba? Lalo na I'm a very short person if you see me face to face. So baka sabihin lang nila yon and they don't take me seriously. What I would do is I would look for the organizer of the event. I think if I could turn back time, I'd try to figure out who's a representative of the organization that I can speak with. Maybe tell them that, hey, I was in this session with this guest and I have some feedback for you. I'd love to talk about it and think through what you might adjust in the future. So I'll ask the organizer, and then during our conversation, maybe I'll ask the organizer if they're comfortable to connect me with the speaker. Like, I'd love to get connected with the speaker through the organizer para mas may weight ng konti yung request, and that speaker would more likely pay attention to me versus me just directly going to him. So yeah, hopefully those are some tips that would help you. And oh nga no, those are things I could have done.
Yes, and I think if people will also attend webinars or like events that they would also encounter that they can use your tips. Okay, Alma.
Okay. Ayan. Oh, okay. So let's ask this next question. Yung the one at the very top, I guess. How to deal with a boss that has a favorite employee?
All right. Yeah, so when it comes to giving feedback to someone higher than you, that is like one of the hardest things that you can do. And I would say it's very context specific. So first, maybe think about what's your relationship like with that boss? Historically, are you able to speak with that boss openly? Like, is that the kind of relationship you have? If the answer is yes, then I would say invite that boss to a meeting, a one-on-one meeting. Tell them that you have some perspective for them about their management and how they're handling the team, and you'd love to talk about it with them. So that's if you have a good relationship. If you don't have a good relationship, then number one, try to get some context first. Try to find out from the people in your team or the people in your organization. Ganyan ba talaga si boss? Like, yan ba yung experience ng ibang tao? Like, just try to get a gauge of what's going on. And then number two, try to see if there are like forums or opportunities where you can bring that up. For example, if you have like a team building or a team conversation where you really will talk about team dynamics, maybe that's a good place to start bringing that up. And you have other people who could also give their observations. If you really have, if you feel like you will put yourself in danger, if you point this out and the boss finds out it's you, then use the mechanisms that are in place for you. Number one is your HR representative is someone you might want to talk to first. And that HR representative could possibly help you with next steps on who you might talk to take that issue further. Usually, your HR representative would suggest speaking with the skip level person, so yung boss ng boss, para siya yung mag-address nung concern. So yeah, different ways that you can handle it. But again, think about your relationship with your boss. The more personal and one-on-one it can be, I would say that's the better way to go if kaya naman.
Agreed. Yeah, maybe we can open the floor for 2 more questions, no, Gabby?
Yeah. Which one do you want to?
I think this top question is actually a very situational question. Yan. How would you call out those people with toxic masculinity or those things that you mentioned earlier?
Right. Yeah, always the trickiest thing, right? So again, think about the context. Where are you? I assume because we're in a webinar about the workplace, I assume that workplace is what you're talking about. Then the next thing to think through is, what are some specific examples of situations when you saw that this person was demonstrating these toxic masculinity behaviors? It's very important to get specific situations kasi hindi pwedeng sabihin na lang natin, lagi kang ganyan. That's not a good way to give feedback. So I would say, write them down. Like you could say, nung Tuesday 3 p.m. meeting, Alma, I saw that you intentionally ignored Gabby. Like you said this to Gabby. Like really take it down, because there are times when people don't know what they're doing. And the more specific you can be, the more helpful your feedback would be. So number 1, observe, take down notes, be specific with your situation. Number 2, so here's the thing. If there's no opportunity to, if the person is not doing their toxic masculinity behaviors in public, then don't call them out in public. What do I mean by that? So if you see, for example, that someone is blatantly giving discriminatory jokes in a group, because that's a public forum, feel free to say something right there and then, like, wag naman ganyan, parang overboard na yung joke. Because it's a public forum, do it in public. But if it's not in a public forum and you have an opportunity to set up time with this person, get a one-on-one meeting with them, then tell them that you just have some feedback that you'd like to give. You'd like to talk through some of the behaviors and how it impacts you. So now if you're in that meeting with that person, give them the specific situation, own the feedback by telling them the impact it had on you. So for example, I can say, Alma, nung Tuesday 3 p.m., you said this to Gabby and you ignored her. It made me feel like I can't come to you because you might ignore me too. So diba? Own it, talk about how it made you feel, and then invite them to conversation. Alma, when you did that, what was your intent? Like, what was going through your head? Kasi diba, you never know, baka hindi lang na-notice ni Alma. So now ask them what was going on, give them the chance to talk about it. Again, like, these are all things that are very context specific, but I hope that you could pull maybe bits and pieces here and there to craft what will work for you.
Yeah, and I hopefully for this person who asked this question and for those interested in that you're able to deal with it with the situation like that better. Okay, we're gonna open it to one last question na lang. Sige, I think this question by Ellen is very similar to what we just sige, I guess it's different in its own way, but how do you address men who still think that feminism should not be encouraged, even if you openly talked about it?
Right. I would say the first thing that comes to mind is ask them what they think feminism means. Like, what is feminism for you? Maybe describe the concept. Because most of the time, also with feminism and toxic masculinity, maraming misconceptions around. And these are not common sense topics na everyone knows. So dapat we start with a foundational understanding so we're all in the same page. I would say that's one of the first things I would do if I were in your situation. Something else that maybe I would try to be a little bit more proactive is to suggest to my team or to my organization that we invite like more resources around these topics, maybe speakers, or if not speakers, maybe openly sharing like more websites about it that summarize these kinds of information. Because I think having forums where everyone is there learning together, it does encourage that learning mindset where people are more open to getting newer ideas. So yeah, hopefully that's something that could help. But again, very important, start with where they are. What is their understanding of feminism?
Yeah, I actually also just wanted to add that you're right that it's riddled with so much misconceptions. If anything, which this is why we wanted to do this theme for the month and related to the workplace. You're gonna see in our next webinars that it's wrong for many to think that a feminist culture in companies should be perceived negatively when in fact it actually has so much more benefits that a lot of companies should be adapting to nowadays. Now that we're gonna save that for a different conversation. But thank you, Ellen, for asking this question. And yeah, and if we look at all the questions, there's so many of you asking questions. We love the engagement. Unfortunately, we don't have all the time. So I just want to thank everyone else that reached out for their questions.
Yeah.
So
There's one question there. It's not a question but a thought. I think that's super valid, and thank you for typing it out. Yes, doing a self-check and the self-reflection is very important. If you go through some of the tips today, right? These are things that we can ask ourselves when are times when maybe I was the one who excluded someone, and when are times when I was the one who intentionally made sure that everyone felt like they belong. So these are things that we can easily reflect on, give ourselves time to identify our behaviors. Yeah, good point.
So, ayun. Thank you everyone for sending in your thoughts and questions. We really appreciate it. So, ayun no. Moving on to closing this program. We just want to say a great big thank you to you, Elijah, for agreeing to be part of our March webinar on The Future is Female. Again, I know you're a very busy person with so much things to do, and we love that you were able to open up our webinar series in such an amazing way. And we can't thank you enough.
Yeah, and thank you also to both of you and to the organization and for everyone here. This is such a hard topic to tackle, but thank you for your patience and for being so engaged as we went through it.
Yeah. So ayan, we're just gonna be closing the program. So Gabby, you can take the next slide.
Yeah, so again, we would like to invite you to complete our webinar series this March. I'm sure that you learned a lot of practical tips from Elijah today. And next week, we're going to have Aya Del Mundo to talk about Girl Boss, the Power of Nurture in Workplaces. And on the following week, we are going to have Bea Almoite. And the title will be The Serve Moses, Speak Up and Step Up. And right now, we're currently offering an asynchronous course, and in celebration of Women's Month, we are giving 50% off to those who use she and her as their pronouns. So we have the Positive Interventions Learning Lab, or what we call the PIL. It's an asynchronous course where you are going to learn about positive emotions. So we are going to share with you the enrollment link on the chat box, and you can check the PIL out.
Wow, and that's 50%. So
Yeah.
that Gabby. So and we also wanted to put out there that we have two courses that will be open for the month of April and May. The first one will be Strat Plan 101, which is our strategy planning leadership course that we offer to public. So we have a first 10 enrollees promo there as well as a group promo. So if this is something that you're interested in, we can send the link to this in the chat later on. And after Strat Plan naman on April, meron naman kami in May, Positive Leadership course. So that's a 6-day course on positive leadership skills that will really help you become a better leader in your workplace. And if you're also interested in that, we can also include that. So that's the courses that we have so far. And so we would like to invite you guys to follow us on Facebook. You just search Positive Workplaces, mahanap nyo rin kami. And also in tandem, we want to we also want to put out to please follow Elijah Corpus Consulting for their very great material. Again, if you also type Elijah Corpus Consulting, you will easily find that on Facebook. Give us both a follow, give us a like and a share, and maybe check out our content if it's in line with what you want. So, ayan. And yeah, again, if you like this webinar or if you like Elijah's talk, feel free to contact us at our email, and maybe Elijah can also input her email in the chat for those who want to. Yan. Ayan. So see, Elijah already sent her link. So ayan. Is that it? Before we do end, yet of course we're also on YouTube. Ayan, we are now sending the post-evaluation form in the chat below. So it's gonna be only open for 30 minutes. So it's 4:28 now. Iko-close na namin siguro yun at 5 p.m. So please do remember, please put your name, make sure it's the correct name and correct details so that there is no errors on our end. And before we go, I would like to invite everyone to turn on their camera so we can do a short photo op. And just thanking everyone that came today. Again, this is very momentous. Thank you for joining us for the start of our free webinar series this March. We have very exciting programs for next week and next week. So I hope you can see it through to the end with us. So ayan. Okay, thank you so much for everyone turning on their cameras. Okay. Sige, wag muna tayo mag-chat para walang okay. Okay, so let's hold our smile, no? Kasi napakarami natin. Okay? 3, 2, 1. Okay, hold that smile. Ayan. And I want to thank everyone who also turned on their camera. And one last time, I want to say thank you to Elijah and the rest of the team. We have a very hardworking team that works behind the scenes, making sure that we answer all the questions that you have on chat, any concerns, and I'd like to show some love for that team. And also thank you, Gabby, for helping me host this. So ayan. Thank you, and have a great day, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Yes, thank you also, Elijah. We're just going to open this for around 15 minutes so that you can have enough time to answer the evaluation sheet. Thank you.